Bore da. I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Lisa Wilcox and I'm a class teacher who has taught at Meadowlane Primary School in St Mellons for 26 years. In 2023-24, I attended the Welsh sabbatical for 2 terms at Cardiff University. I found the course's structured approach, presenting targeted chunks and sentence patterns in a clear, systematic way, transformative for my teaching and learning styles when I returned to the classroom. This tool allowed me to recall Welsh sentence structures far more effectively. In the early stage of the course, I often experienced cognitive overload when trying to process Welsh sentence patterns, but the use of sentence builders and gamification made the learning more manageable, memorable, and generally far more enjoyable for myself, with the added benefit of retaining information in my long-term memory as opposed to my working memory. Whilst on the course, we studied and were fortunate to carry out a session online with Dr. Gianfranco Conti, who is an advocate of using EPI strategies with his Marzi approach to learning a second language. The session inspired me to use his approach and adapt my teaching of Welsh in the classroom on my return to school. When I returned to teaching in the summer term and started to use this bank of resources and useful tools to enhance my teaching of Welsh, I started to think if we could carry out these strategies to teach second language skills, could we use them to promote teaching in our first language, English? At Meadowlane, one of the most challenging aspects for the classroom teacher is to encourage the children's love of LLC skills. Several of our ALN and EAL pupils struggle to compose and write a sentence. This often led to a lack of motivation, perseverance, and resilience to write independently and incorporate the skills they have been introduced to in the writing journey process into their extended piece of writing. In order to understand why, I feel it's very important to gain an understanding of the context of the school. St Mellons is ranked in the 10% of the most deprived areas in Wales. We currently have 71% who are eligible for free school meals. The school is situated in a Flying Start catchment and 28 children currently have an IDP. Many children live within local authority housing. There is a high level of unemployment in the area and there's been a significant increase in EAL new to English pupils. 28% of children have English as a second language and very low baseline of learners in social literacy skills at nursery level. As many of the staff feel drained, myself included when it comes to the Big Write weeks, I went ahead and I started to trial the approach which had been applied in my Welsh teaching to English. This was in order to see if applying the sentence builders and the games when teaching writing would have a positive impact on the pupils improving their independence to write and teaching the skills for the Big Write less onerous on the teacher. After a trial of applying the sentence builders and games to write a fact file about bears, which was pupil-led as a result of carrying out poetry work the previous term based on the book Brown Bear, What Can You See? By Bill Martin Jr., I could see there was a positive reaction from the pupils and the quality of their writing had improved. As we had drilled the vocab, revisited the sentence patterns, the maths, several times and played the games on a regular basis. The sentences started to become embedded in their long-term memory, so the ALN learners who often struggled to create a sentence were now able to retain and were more confident when creating their sentences. We followed a PowerPoint, we drilled the vocab, and we kept to the same games that we used in Welsh. So the children were familiar with the rules and the level of engagement was high, as it often was when the children played their games in their daily Welsh lesson. My head then spoke to the cluster heads that I had started to use this approach in my literacy lesson after a positive lesson observation. This led to Marina and Karen coming to visit the school and discussing the possibility of a trial. I continued to work alongside Karen and Marina in the summer of 2025, and I could see an improvement in the children's enthusiasms that the games brought and the way the sentence builders started to provide the learners to write more independently. I was then taken on the funded project using sentence builders and gamification in the teaching of English from September with CSE. The aims for our school were to develop independence in pupils' writing, to develop pupils' LLC skills, speaking, listening, reading and writing, ALN learners to create sentences communicating clearly, and to use gamification in lessons to ensure full participation with all the learners in a fun and engaging way. The genre that we needed to cover this term was instructional writing. The consensus was to carry out a cold write with a group of learners and then assess against the final piece of work produced for their instructions on how to build a model of a building or item for their city of the future. In the cold write, there was limited structure among the pupils. Very few had used time connectives to start the sentences, and there was no resource list, headings or subheadings. After using the sentence mats and the games for several weeks, it was evident that there was good progress by all pupils that had taken part in the cold write trial. Their final drafts showed a marked improvement with many features of an instructional text, and using the sentence builders to support had improved pupils' sentence structures. Teachers found who used the PowerPoint structure that pupils were independent in their approach to writing due to using the sentence builders as a tool. Teachers found it easier when carrying out extended writing opportunities, as pupils now had a tool available to use, resulting in more independent learners. Since then, we have carried out another writing genre on poetry, same process applied, hook, sentence builder, and this time we looked at synonyms for colours and feelings, where the pupils had to use their senses to describe a colour. We found that the pupils were using the sentence builders with greater independence to feed into their writing. And again, level of engagements were high, even with the more reluctant writers. The skills were then applied in our AOL, Apply Our Learning Week, this half term, and at Meadowlane we carry out AOL weeks every half term. This is where skills are applied from the previous half term into their new topic. We have found this essential in Meadowlane as the genre of writing needs to be applied several times to ensure the pupils can recall the features and write independently. The Adventurers team, PS2, all decided that one of our targets in our performance development this year would be to use sentence builders and gamification to promote LLC skills when carrying out weekly literacy work and in our AOL weeks. After our triads, we all discussed and agreed that we all found it a useful resource with engagement levels being high in most, if not all, pupils. Some comments from staff were the pupils were able to be writing more independently and their approach to learning was far greater. The children's listening skills had improved in whole class introductions, especially when playing the games as they needed to focus to play the game. And many found that it was easier carrying out extended writing opportunities as pupils now had this tool available to use, resulting in more independent learners. So, important points to consider. Always consider your learners, consider your reading level, your ALN learners, how they interpret the information. You may need to include the pictures to accompany the words, create a build-up, create a waggle, drill the vocabulary, match the word to the picture, make them as bilingual as you can, use the Welsh language for the words so they are familiar with them, and asking the questions. Introduce every aspect slowly and make sure that they fully understand everything before moving on. Introduce the sentence builder really gradually, ensure the games are running alongside and they're accessible for if it's a whole class approach, all learners' involvement, so everybody feels successful with their learning. Be prepared to adapt. If there's too much information on the page, it was extremely daunting. Our best sentence builders were the ones that were most precise for everybody to be able to access them. Remember, this is trial and error. You may need to adapt it several times. Allow the children to add to them as they're going along. Okay, add to the vocabulary. Some genres led better to the sentence builders than the others. For example, the fact file about the bears was far more effective than the story writing. Story writing, you may need several sentence builders in order to build on it. One could be a setting, one introducing the characters using two-way sentences, another being the plot. Allow time to redraft their work. What do you want them to achieve as a result? What do you want the pupils to achieve? In our case, it was more independent writing. Continue to apply these skills throughout. Instructional writing, carry out several times in continuous provision or AOL weeks to ensure that the skills are fully embedded. So pupils became far more independent in their approach to writing using the sentence builders. Their writing skills had improved as a result. Cold write to hot write, more features used. ALM pupils were retaining sentences due to repetition, being taught in a fun way. And the teachers found pupils were carrying out writing tasks with a very high level of engagement. So our objectives at the end of the trial were met. So the next step is to share this now with teachers and SLT via Inset. As a phase, we're going to continue to use the sentence builders and build as a resource for pupils at Meadowlane in the next term. And then from September, we hope to extend to classes in PS1 and ALN learners in PS3. So it was a success. These are just some quotes from some of the children. They liked Dino Laugh and Sefyll, Last Man Standing, Trapdoor was their favourite. Thoroughly engaged. Diolch yn wrando. Thanks for listening.